Y la primera pregunta que se me hizo fue, ¿vos quién tenés desaparecido? Entonces sentí que todas éramos la misma persona. No se preguntaba ni qué posición política tenían los hijos, no se preguntaba nada. Lo único que había que luchar era para exigir que se nos diera información sobre esos hijos. Y desde ese momento me sentí realmente que había encontrado el lugar donde yo iba a luchar.
30th of April, 1977. 14 housewives asking for the location of their children. One big city square in front of Argentina's presidential palace. One military dictatorship. Violent security forces that ordered the housewives to disperse. 14 housewives who defied orders and stayed in the plaza. This was the origin of the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo. The children of the mothers were part of the estimated 30,000 people disappeared by the brutal military dictatorship headed by Jorge Rafael Videla. The dictatorship, lasting from 1976 until 1983 and backed by the US, violently suppressed, kidnapped, and tortured any left-wing subversives. These kidnapped subversives would often never reappear after being kidnapped and were nicknamed desaparecidos, the disappeared. By demanding to know where their children were, the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo were also deemed subversive, as General Ramón Camps, the former chief of police of Buenos Aires, states here.
Usted no se olvide que estas señoras, que hoy están continuando la lucha subversiva que han desarrollado sus hijos antaño, tratando de presentar figuras y presentar posiciones que evidentemente no hacen nada más que continuar la acción subversiva que hicieron sus hijos. Darle pie a las argumentaciones que presentan las organizaciones como Madre de Plaza de Mayo, Abuela de Plaza de Mayo, cosas así por el estilo, que son organizaciones que responden evidentemente a intereses del marxismo internacional, es a tomar una posición tendenciosa.
While Gramsci's fascist Cold War rhetoric here is extreme, his claim that the mothers were subversives like their children was something they wholeheartedly disagreed with. At the beginning of their movement, the mothers thought of themselves as apolitical housewives. They even state in their founding act that they are not motivated by any political objective. However, in 1986, after the end of the dictatorship, the mothers split into two groups. The Línea Fundadora, whose goal was to continue the search for desaparecidos and focus on keeping their memory alive, and the Asociación Madres de Plaza de Mayo, led by Eve de Bonafini. The Asociación took on a more political and confrontational stance against the new Argentine government, departing from the apolitical origins of the movement. The Mother of Plaza de Mayo's transition from an apolitical group of housewives looking for their children into a political movement protesting for global liberation demonstrates how resisting injustice and oppression is always a political act, and how successful resistance movements embrace the radical nature of resistance through solidarity with other movements and goals. We do not judge our detained and disappeared children. We are not even asking for their liberty. We only ask to be told where they are and what they're being accused of. That they aren't tortured, that they be kept in humane conditions, that we can see and help them. Can there be a more simple, more basic, more correct, more human, more Christian appeal? This excerpt from the 1979 founding act of the Civil Association of Mothers of Plaza de Mayo demonstrates just how adamant the mothers were to not be associated with any sort of politics, associating themselves with the label of mother first and foremost. In the excerpt, they are just mothers looking for their children. They aren't even asking for the liberty of their children. They only want to know where their children are. During their gatherings, the mothers didn't hold signs demanding an end to the corruption of the military dictatorship. They wore white headscarves and held pictures of their children. In a way, this makes sense. Most women in the first meetings of the mothers were working or middle class, middle-aged. Most only had a high school education and had never been involved in politics. Resistance strategies and movements were way out of their purview. Later in the act, they emphasize that they'll do everything in their power to get answers, as long as these actions respect the law and public order, an approach that would be deemed liberal had they been demonstrating within a liberal democracy, which they weren't. It didn't really matter whether the mothers didn't address the systems and political circumstances that led to the disappearances of their children during their gatherings at the Plaza de Mayo, because they believed it wasn't necessary, or because they didn't understand that to get their children back, the whole military dictatorship system had to be destroyed. What mattered was that the mothers believed that the one thing they wanted, the location of their children, was a simple ask and the bare minimum. Because this belief, and never getting answers to their one simple request, is what ultimately led to their politicization. During their initial years of organizing, the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo both challenged and reinforced the patriarchy. In Hilary Klein's book Compañeras, Zapatista Women's Stories, she explains the relationship between patriarchy, women's liberation, and resistance movements. The dual and interdependent relationship between women's liberation and social revolution illustrates that popular struggles cannot achieve collective liberation for all people without addressing patriarchy, and, likewise, women's freedoms cannot be disentangled from racial, economic, and social justice. Though the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo were not aiming to achieve any sort of liberation for anyone during the beginning of their movement, their struggle was not exempt from Klein's diagnosis. By utilizing the label of mothers to demand information about desaparecidos during the military dictatorship, the mothers were trading on the value of a word associated with domesticity, care, and patience to downplay the aggressive political stance they were actually taking. Because asking for information about subversives during a brutal military dictatorship was a political act, whether the mothers acknowledged it or not. The mothers were both reifying patriarchal assumptions about the role of a mother in society by downplaying their political motivations and embracing motherly tactics in their organizing through the symbol of the white headscarf, yet also challenging the patriarchy by demonstrating as mothers in the first place. As Virginia Morales explains in her book De la Cocina a la Plaza, when the mothers officially founded the Civil Association of the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo, they politicized motherhood and displaced the line between the public and private spheres. The Mothers of Plaza de Mayo redefined motherhood by protesting, while trying to maintain its definition in 1970s society. However, as the movement progressed beyond the dictatorship, and the mothers demanded justice not only for their own children, but for collective liberation from foreign banks and colonial influences for all Latin Americans, Klein's words about women's freedom being unable to be disentangled from racial, economic, and social justice do indeed start to ring more true for the mothers. In order to resist injustice across the globe, the mothers had to free themselves from the restrictive, apolitical mother identity that they had started with and expand into a political organization, Asociación Madres de Plaza de Mayo, that not only demanded justice for their children as mothers, but justice for all oppressed peoples as female activists.
Yo estoy aquí sentada en esta silla hablando con ustedes es justamente por los movimientos de solidaridad europeos y de todo el mundo, que levantaron su voz cuando nos llevaban tantas veces detenidas.
On their website, the Association of the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo say, "We support the revolutionary struggle of all peoples who seek liberation. We know that we're on the right path, and that even if none of us live to see the result, we're planting goals so that others can reap dreams and hopes in a world with more justice and solidarity." The current goals of the mothers represent the final stage in their politicization as a movement. But do these goals really mean anything, or are the mothers in their current form just another type of choice feminism? In Bell Hook's Feminism, a movement to end sexist oppression, she discusses how liberal feminism in the US is considered an identity more than a political movement. The willingness to see feminism as a lifestyle choice rather than a political commitment reflects the class nature of the movement. Because of their position as working and middle-class housewives living in a country heavily and negatively affected by colonial powers, the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo never really had the choice to see their resistance as a lifestyle choice, like white liberal feminists in the US did, and do, because the mothers' resistance was inherently radical in a military-run state. Their movement grew and resisted destruction by the US-funded military dictatorship partly because of movements across the world who were politically committed to supporting the mothers. The Mothers' transition from only protesting about the dirty war to protesting about the negative effects of neoliberalism on human rights across Latin America demonstrates an even further departure from Hooks' description of choice feminism. Though they don't claim to be feminists, at this point in their journey as an organization, the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo could easily slip into a sort of choice feminism and see being a mother or grandmother as a lifestyle choice or as an identity from the past. But they don't. Whether it's because of their location in the world, the support from global movements that help them survive, or just their ongoing commitment to justice, since their first gathering, the Mothers continue to protest every Thursday at the Plaza de Mayo. This not only demonstrates the political commitment that Hooks mentions, but a genuine care and fight for the well-being of humanity. The Mothers of Plaza de Mayo grew from a small group of 14 women in a plaza to a large organization protesting global injustices. The final sentence on the website of the Association of Mothers of Plaza de Mayo is this: "We are a political organization, now with a national and popular project of liberation." This is a stark change from their original founding act in 1979 that attempted to disassociate the movement from any sort of political ideology. Though their actions were always political, the Mothers' recognition of the political nature of their protests after 1986 represents the necessary shift of a successful movement towards solidarity with other global political movements. We can learn from the successful politicization of the Mothers, and also from their spirit, solidarity, and storytelling. There is an extensive catalog of videos on their YouTube channel that contains an oral history of the organization told by the Mothers themselves, an incredible feat and an important example of writing one's own history. The most important lesson to draw from the Mothers, however, is one they learned from their own disappeared children. Community is more important than anything.